Alrighty, we have Jaime Baxter on the podcast. Welcome, Jaime.
Mike, thanks for having me. It's a joy to be
Yeah.
here.
So you were here because you started something called Exodus 90, which I would market it as 75 hard, but for someone that wants to grow spiritually and mentally. So is that an accurate pitch for it?
It's terrible. I don't know as much about 75 Hard as I should. I stumbled into it maybe within the last year or two. Um, for us at Exodus, it is challenging for sure. So we offer spiritual exercises all throughout the year, but I think for us, it's probably important to start with everything is
Yeah.
fundamentally a spiritual work. So
Yeah.
it's not so much about proving something to yourself or to others as it is about um, putting yourself into a place, a disposition to receive grace and to respond in love, to where God has called you to be. So most of our guys are married with kids, and it looks like trying to become a better husband and father. Um, but Exodus 90 for sure is known for its kind of challenging elements. And one of the things I guess that's interesting about it is when you look at the history of Christianity, you see the ascetic tradition is present, all throughout. And asceticism isn't so much about like just doing hard things or kind of like denying your senses just to do that or to overcome and become powerful. But it's much more about entering into your dependence on God and that He holds and sustains you at every moment. So anyway, that tradition is present in our work, and our hope is that men become more free through prayer, asceticism, and accountability with other men,
Yeah.
so that they can love better.
I think it's so needed in the world today, in churches, in men's circles. We were chatting a little bit before the call started that I came to know about Exodus just recently, where I was feeling like, I had a group of guys that were like, hey, let's, how can we take things up a notch? How can we become better husbands, better fathers, and wanted to do more than just a physical challenge, in terms of like a physical training. And so had reached out to some buddies with some, hey, what if we did this over a period of time? And one guy was like, hey, that's exactly this Exodus thing. That's exactly like Exodus. I was like, so I looked you guys up and I'm like, wow, this is really cool, But what struck out to me, and maybe we should, I should have had you already like intro what it actually is, but is there anyone I've talked to that's gone through what you guys offer, and then any of your material, there was a level of excellence that it seemed like you're going for a higher standard. It's not just like, hey, let's do this like casual thing, which is what a lot of the physical things like 75 hard are more aimed at. It's kind of trying to push you to an upper limit, which I saw the same vein with Exodus, which was encouraging because you don't often see that in kind of Christian challenges, curriculum, those sorts of things. And so I think it's really cool. It's really unique. And I believe that's what's appealing to it, especially young men that are fathers, that are husbands, that are like wanting to up their game. They want to rise to that challenge. And so maybe we back the truck up a little bit, Jaime, and tell me a little bit about the story of Exodus and kind of how it came about.
Yeah, so that's a beautiful point. I think for us, both in the content of what we do and in how we try to go about it as a company, we're really trying to blend the faith with competence. And both of those things have to come together, in our staff and ultimately in everything that we would produce. And for me, when you look at the history of Christianity, we weren't slapping Bible verses on stuff casually and hoping it would work out. It's like, the Christians were known for being in the world, but not
Yeah.
of the world, and it's just like so much of art history is the story of the truths of the faith kind of being unfolded and articulated and expressed in, different ways through music, art, drama, all kinds of expression of culture. It's only, I think, kind of in recent kind of post-Christian times or the apostolic times that we're in now that you kind of feel like we can get a little bit maybe lazy is too hard, but, at least for us at our place of work, we're trying to bring these things back together: competence, excellence, and fundamental trust in God, in everything that we do. But yeah, for me, my story is, it's interesting. I had an amazing father who had a conversion when I was a boy. And so I remember life before and after Jesus Christ, in our relationships and in our home. And I would only learn much later on in like this very powerful, like kind of rite of initiation that my father brought me through, that the grace of his conversion when I was 5 years old was that it wasn't too late to pass on the faith to his sons.
Mm.
And this for me has kind of become, the focal point of my entire life, at this point. All of the research on this is clear, secular and religious studies. Like when you want to, like, what predicts if a child will practice the faith? It is so often that the father is the critical factor. He is so deeply influential in so many ways, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, but also spiritually. And so, it was kind of through my father's gift to me that I've become so passionate about men's formation and ministry as well. And, there's so many things that I could say about kind of how it's gone, but, my father's influence on me was something that, changed the course of my life. And 9 years into Exodus, I'm just trying to replicate the gift that he gave to me, for other men, trying to help them in some small way, grow in their love of God, and pray that bears fruit in his family, for his wife and his kids. That they would see the difference. They would see a father who images God the Father, even in, his struggles and failings, which we all have and all share.
Yeah. So tell me that, I think is great. I think that's, there's such an importance that is needing to be put on fathers and their faith and the role that they play. I think that's, the statistics are clear, like you said. That's the way that it goes. It doesn't matter the church or it does matter, but by and away the genuineness of the faith and how they approach their faith is really driven by how active their father is, right? And what they're actually living out day in and day out. But can you tell me a little bit about how Exodus came about? The genesis of Exodus, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. So, that was kind of like the earliest impact on my life. I would end up going into the seminary at a pretty young age. So, I had a somewhat irregular high school experience. I played golf, and golf was an amazing contemplative time for me. Just to be out in nature, hitting a ball around. I'm also pretty scrawny, so no one could hit me. It was just me and the ball. So it was something that I was really drawn to. But I was also active at my parish, and specifically in serving at the altar for Holy Mass. I was involved in fraternities from a very young age, and so basically my faith experience, I've always had other men, that I was close to and with. Always had mentors, and which is to say, I was always known. I didn't just have buddies. I had brothers, and so at the age of 18, I'd go off to seminary, and discern the Catholic priesthood. I ended up being there for 6 years before I really felt like God had called me out into the world. And I didn't exactly know why. I was actually pretty surprised by that. And to be honest with you, you have this trajectory for your life, and all of a sudden it's not what you thought. So it was it was a very challenging time. And for other guys that discern out of seminary, as common as it is to do that, it can be like, gosh, all right, where do I go with all this stuff? I've studied philosophy, I've studied the history of theology, but how do I put this to use, and make my contribution in the world? And I had all those questions. While I was in seminary, as a part of fraternities where we were meeting in small groups, and kind of the seeds of Exodus were being formed. And so, yeah, within a couple of weeks, the question was like, hey, wonder if we can kind of share this around, you know. And at the same time, I was also experiencing that, you know, I just felt a void. You know, I was like, gosh, I can go to church, but no one knows me here.
Mm.
You know, I'm not being accountable. I could feel, um, I just kind of like, I felt life outside of a fraternity and life outside of accountability. And I was like, kind of concerned about it. And I was also just like kind of stunned that for most guys, like that's their experience. Like it is on them to take a lot of intentionality and initiative, you know, or else you can just get ground up by the world or overly consumed in work or whatever. And so Exodus kind of became, you know, in addition to kind of the things I mentioned about my dad, an opportunity to try to create a place of formation, if you will, for guys that were looking to take their masculine friendships to deeper levels, you know, hoping to grow, you know, in self-mastery and in friendship, you know. That's what I wanted Exodus to be. So, yeah, 9 years into it, it's working out okay. It's grown, yeah, stunningly over the last couple of years. Um, and yeah, just having a lot of fun, kind of bringing everything together that I care about into, you know, my 9 to 5.
Yeah. No, I think that's the it was basically birthed out of a need that you had, which I think is makes it most impactful, right? You know, it's like, hey, you know what you need, and you saw a void. What do you How do you think that was met prior to Exodus? You mentioned fraternities. You know, tell me about like what was else in that void prior.
Do you mean, how do you mean that, I guess, prior to
Yeah,
starting the
yeah.
company or, yeah.
So Exodus exists, and it's answering a question of it's answering kind of this like community, this accountability. Um, you know, in years past, was that satisfied through more of like a church fraternity, and then that those have kind of not become as popular. I mean, maybe it's kind of an awkward question, but I think it's interesting because there's a lot of discussion around men being, you know, lonely, about mental health in, especially when you get into 30s and 40s, and it's like you have less and less friend groups and that sort of thing, and that's kind of a known thing, but that seems to be increasing to some degree, and maybe I'm becoming more aware of it. But is Exodus kind of a version two of something that existed before, you know, that is no longer there? Do you know what I mean?
That's a great question. Yeah. And honestly, I don't know that anyone's asked me that live on a podcast before. So I'm just going to think out loud.
Yeah.
I might change my mind about
Yeah.
this in the future. But um, yeah, you know, I think that there's a couple things here. I think I don't want to like look at the past and romanticize it. I really don't. I mean, there are obvious struggles, even at kinds of the glory days of Christianity, even, you
Mm.
know. I, I'm like, I don't know, this might be my optimism or just like my trust that I'm here now for a reason in this time and not in another one. All that being said, you know, I think you can generalize, at least when I talk to older men, that, you know, families were, you know, tighter knit and there was less, you know, distracting them. And certainly just everything was much more localized, you know, apart from the kind of globalization that's the fruit of, you know, a technologized society like the one in which we live. Um, you know, and that's a void, you know, I think for sure, you know, I mean, just talking to my peers, how many of them could I ask and say, hey, you know, was your father a man you want to be like, you know? And the answer to that is oftentimes not, you know, and that's apart from, you know, the divorce challenge, you know, that we face together as a culture. So I think, you know, in some sense, it's, you know, as things have become less localized, we've become less known.
Mm.
And there's a lot of opportunities in that. One, to return the hearts of fathers to their sons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, but two, to bring men together into a, you know, true fraternity, you know, not, you know, nothing, not that there's anything wrong with watching sports and drinking beer. I'm obsessed with the Indianapolis Colts. Okay. So apart from whatever it might look like online, you know, it's like, I love the Colts and I could talk to you for the next 3 hours about what I think they should be doing next week. Okay. But, you know, it's like, at the same time, I friendships just on that level are not the deepest friendship that I long for, and I think Exodus can kind of help to localize, guys in a really powerful way.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a couple quick thoughts that I give to that really good question.
You said it's something that you've said I think a few times already in this conversation was you said I was known, or you being this concept of being known, which is interesting in the modern context because you're you are air quotes known by a lot of people, or more people now than you would have been or had the opportunity to be, decades ago even. But you're not really known in a true sense in the way that you were using it, where you're actually accountable. Someone knows your suffering, they know your wins, your losses, but also your potential, right? And being able to call you to a higher potential, which I think is really important. And so you also said something that was interesting, where you said, people are distracted. There's a distractibility. So the known is like you're like an inch deep and a mile wide, as opposed to an inch wide and a mile deep with relationships, which is I think a very interesting concept. But it's a new reality, right? So it's a new world you find yourself in. So you can sit back and romanticize about days of old, and you said you don't want to necessarily look back on the past and romanticize it, but you have to compare it to we find ourselves in. And that's a matter, just as a fact of how the world has kind of changed. And you can, I kind of see Exodus as like tapping that, right? They're saying, hey, we're going to tap some of these tools, this ability to connect with people. Maybe you don't have that locally as much, but you can connect with some other people. And then we're going to take you the mile deep, which I think is really, that's what's so exciting about it. It's like, it's increasing the depth, which is what you're saying is the knownness, of others that you're wanting to go into.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, at the end of the day, like Exodus is interesting for a couple of reasons, but our meetings are unlike Bible studies, where it's not really a cognitive thing. I mean, we walk through scripture, of course, and we help you to learn how to pray and all that stuff. And that's all good, but it's not about learning. The meetings themselves, all of our guys meet every week. It's just a place to tell the truth and be known. You don't have to have it all together. And I tell you what, I think the most some of the most successful people, even that I've come to know, that I really think are really genuine, good people, they're just shockingly humble about the things that they're not great at. And I love Exodus fraternities because you could stereotype us or straw man us in some sense, like, oh, you get together and you talk about how good you are. It's like, it's
Yeah.
literally the inverse of that. It's like, no, I mean, here's all the ways I'm really struggling, or here's the ways I'm failing my spouse right now, or, hey, this was a moment where, I didn't issue the word I should have to my boy, whatever it was. Um, and ultimately that becomes a forum for a couple of things. And one of those is, one, the inspiration of just being with other guys on the road with you. And two, for just the mutual understanding that, like, hey, we've got a setback, but we can get up again, and we can keep on this journey together. So, and our hope, from kind of a higher level or maybe spiritual standpoint, is that vulnerability you can encounter in an Exodus fraternity, becomes the fodder, or like kind of the example, for what your relationship
Mm.
with God should look like. It really shouldn't be about just, you don't need to pretend to be anything other than where you are. And God the Father craves to just hear that from you, and ultimately I think it's through vulnerability that the most fruit interiorly is born. And Exodus fraternities are a good forum to kind of begin that kind of
Yeah.
orientation.
What are what are some of your plans for Exodus? Like, as you guys have grown, I know, pretty significantly over the last like little bit, especially. I think as from my vantage point, it seems like that there's been significant growth even just more recently. Tell me a little bit about kind of how you guys are thinking about the future, and maybe some exciting trends you're seeing, and transformations that you're seeing inside of the fraternities. And and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the affirmation in that, Mike. So, one of the things that happens in startup life, and founders listening to this know this, is as you start to experience traction, you get a lot of opportunities. Lots of partnerships, lots of other audiences, all that kind of stuff. For me, I've just tried to stay really focused on who we're called to serve, and so the implicit word there, the word I would make explicit, and that is the calling dimension to our work at Exodus. Not only myself, but everyone on our team feels deeply called to be here to serve in this space for the men that we reach. And, I don't look at our work as like a personal passion project. I look at it as something I've been
Mm-hmm.
asked to do. And I've been given a lot of life and meaning from being faithful most of the time, not all the time, to the calling that I've got, but I wouldn't do it apart from it. And in fact, the moment it's not there anymore, I'll be probably pretty relieved. But I definitely look at it that way, like it's a deeply, it's a response to something in front of me that
Yeah.
won't let me go. And I'm trying to stay faithful to it. And I say all that because that's enabled me to stay super focused. And so, a lot of my time now, as our founder and CEO, I spend in prayer and contemplative time, so every big decision I have to make is spent before the Lord. And I just ask him for what he wants, in a sense. Not that I get that right all the time, or not that I try to play the God card. I certainly have good reasons for the decisions that I make, but all that's to say, I just try to submit everything to him, and let him bear the fruit that he wants to through the work that we're doing for as long
Yeah.
as he would like. So as it relates to the future, I kind of take it a day at a time, and I know that we'll stay super focused on, our men. Most of our guys are young husbands and fathers, early stage career guys. That's where we serve. Certainly some younger, certainly some older than that, but those are
Yeah.
our men. And so I think specifically one of the things I'm excited about is we're going to do a lot better job on our platform within the next couple of months of connecting men into local communities where pre-existing Exodus
Mm-hmm.
fraternities are, or for guys that are just looking to find other kinds of guys that share their values, that are looking for brotherhood as well. So up to this point, it's been kind of bring your friends for Exodus. We're going to take on some of that burden because it can be challenging, right? To look for something more meaningful. So we want to help to facilitate that in local communities all
That's
over the world.
awesome. I think that's having a true calling like that. You talk about you comparing yourself to other founders or just founders and getting distracted when they have traction. And, I think the best founders stay true to a mission or an ideal or a philosophy, whether it's like, a Steve Jobs of, product led, consumer goods, or say like Elon Musk is like, we're going to Mars, and that's where we focus. But I think having a mission that's a godly mission and someone that's focused on that is so important. And I think that'll fuel the growth, the growth that God wants to give you. Right. I mean, it's not about growth. It's not about growth on a numbers level per se. It's about, staying true to the mission, which I think is so important. So that's awesome.
Yeah, those are two guys I do think about a lot. Pros and cons to both. You can't help but be deeply,
Yeah.
admire, them as well, and I certainly do. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really admire about Elon in particular is the guy is just ruthlessly focused
Yeah.
on why he is here, and not sure that I share all the same core values or first principles with Elon. But I deeply admire that quality in him. And certainly when I was starting in the earliest days of Exodus in 2015, when I looked like a complete and total idiot doing what I was doing, not even knowing if I had a real job at all, I'd listen to biographies of Elon Musk. I was just like, all right, this guy looked
Yeah.
stupid for a long time, so
Yeah.
I just got to keep going.
Well, keep going, Jamie. The world and a lot of men need you and your devotion to the Lord and what you're doing. So I'm excited, and I'm on Team Exodus, so I'm pumped. So,
Thanks, Mike.
well, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate the time. I appreciate you sharing your heart with me.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mike, no, it's a joy. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to kind of, I mean, you're talking about and focused on a lot of the same questions and challenges that we are. So it's awesome to meet someone so passionate about dads and trying to become the best fathers that we can for our
Absolutely.
spouse
And
and our
if
kids.
you are interested, check out exodus90.com is where you can find all about what Jamie's up to and his team, and get plugged into something that you can find a fraternity. So thanks, Jamie.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike.